Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I am Ben Miller, and at 41, I was married for 15 years when this story unfolds. I work as an electronics specialist, primarily focusing on troubleshooting and repairs, although I also do some installations. I got lucky with some software I developed and a few gadgets I patented, which means I'm financially secure, but I'm still too young to retire. 8 years ago, I seized the opportunity to buy the company I was working for. Now, I'm a silent owner, with a CEO and CFO who are sworn to secrecy. So even my wife didn't know about my ownership. My journey began after I left the Army, where I served as a communications specialist. I was injured during an attack while working with a communications team outside Kirkuk in Iraq. It was during my time as a troubleshooter that I heard about a device that would enable a home computer to serve as an answering machine. Curious to see how it worked, I set it up at home on my landline. To my surprise, I discovered that the device had a bug that turned out to be advantageous for me. I met Kathy soon after my military service, and we quickly connected. Kathy is just a year younger than I am and stands tall, with long legs that seem to go on forever. She possesses stunning beauty, highlighted by her upside-down teardrop-shaped face. Kathy has Polish and Miami Indian heritage, which gives her a unique and beautiful look. She has stunning blue-green eyes and high cheekbones, making her an exotic knockout. Kathy was 22 when I met her, fresh out of college and eager to start her own life. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was a virgin and had only been on a couple of dates, with no serious boyfriend since high school. We crossed paths at a local recruiting seminar where the company I was looking into was seeking a head for their communications department. They had asked me to return in 45 minutes to meet the president for a management position. While waiting, I went to grab a bite at the food booth and noticed Kathy in front of me. She ordered more than she could carry, so I offered to help her if she would wait for my order. She agreed, and I carried her food back to the table she was sharing with 2 other young women. She thanked me and invited me to join them. I agreed to join Kathy at the table, and we talked until I had to leave for my appointment. I got her phone number, promising to call that evening to check in on her job hunt, though to be honest, that wasn't really on my mind. After my conversation with the man about the position, I felt something was off. The responsibilities he described sounded more like industrial espionage than actual communications. I ended up declining the offer. 3 months later, that company collapsed after attempting to sell trade secrets from a Fortune 500 aerospace company. The man I spoke with was convicted and ended up spending time in a federal prison. I found another company later that day, where I was hired to streamline and manage their communications and networks. That evening, I called Kathy, and she was both surprised and pleased to hear from me. She mentioned that a lot of the jerks who say they will call never do, and that I must not be sending her the same signals. I said that the only signals that I saw were that she was not interested in a short-term relationship. I said that while I was not really smooth or accomplished, I was never after any short-term gigs. I asked how her job search went, and she said she had 3 good possibilities. I told her that I was hired by a company and would start in 3 weeks. I asked if she was free for coffee the next day, and she agreed. We met and I told her about my upcoming job and how I had just sold a piece of software, as well as received patents for my gadgets. I was bragging some, but I was proud of my babies as I called my accomplishments. I asked about her possibilities and found out that she had interviewed with the shady company, but did not get a negative vibe about them. She also interviewed at 2 local banks. One was for a trust officer to handle 2 charitable trusts, and the other was for a loan officer in their commercial loan department. She said she really wanted the trust position, and luckily she got it. We dated for a year. A week later, I got a knock on my apartment door, and she was standing there and handed me an envelope and my engagement ring. The envelope contained the suggested prenup and a note that was short and very hard for me to read. It said, "Ben, I haven't shared everything about myself with you. I have a trust fund that, while not huge, is significant to me. I'll receive it when I turn 25 or get married, whichever comes first. Chad Williams, who works at the bank, suggested the prenup. He's also the administrator of my trust. I was told that the prenup is meant to protect me. This isn't about trust. I love you and want to marry you. I know in my heart that you would never hurt me, but my mind tells me I need to protect myself. I'm returning the engagement ring until you either sign the prenup, propose one of your own for negotiation, or call me and tell me to eat shit and die. Again, I love you, and this situation is making me very sad. Please decide quickly. Love you with all my heart and soul. Kathy." I set Kathy's note aside and examined the prenup. While the legal jargon was somewhat confusing, it was clear that it was designed to protect her. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that if we were to get a divorce, I would be left with nothing. I was furious. The next day, I called my lawyer and brought the prenup to him. I instructed him to draft 2 prenups. The first one as one-sided as the one she had given me, and the second to protect both my premarital assets and her trust fund. I told him to be fair, but I wanted to include a clause that would nullify all postnuptial joint assets if either of us committed adultery. I planned to show her the unfair prenup first, anticipating her reaction, and then reveal the fair one. 3 days later, I received the documents. I couldn't help but laugh at the unfair prenup. It practically screamed, "I don't trust you, and if we divorce, you're screwed." The fair prenup seemed reasonable, but I still resented the whole idea. Given Kathy's attitude when she presented her prenup, I felt justified in my approach. So, I wrote her this note. "Kathy, I won't tell you to eat shit and die, but here's a prenup my lawyer drafted to protect me. I must warn you, it's as one-sided as the one you gave me. In fact, I used yours to start a fire in the backyard for some of the neighbors' boys who were camping out. Your words and actions show me how little you trust me. If you want to marry me, you need to sign my prenup. Let me know you want to negotiate a fair one. Or eat shit and die. I love you and want to marry you, but I won't accept being mistrusted until I give you a reason not to. You can easily get the ring back. Just show me that you trust me. I don't like the idea of a prenup, but I will sign a fair one. If I don't hear from you before I start my job, I'll move on. Otherwise, the ring is still here when you're ready to claim it. I do love you, Ben." A couple of days later, I received a furious phone call from Kathy. I let her vent about what a selfish scumsucker I was and how I could go to hell before she'd ever sign the prenup. She claimed it was so bad she wouldn't even use it to wrap garbage. I couldn't help but laugh, which only made her cry harder. Once she calmed down, I said, "Now you know how I felt. If you want a prenup so badly, I have one you can give to your lawyer or advisor to look over. We can use it as a starting point. Just know that your lack of trust made me insist on an adultery penalty for either side. So, do we move forward, or do I eat shit and die?" Kathy started laughing and replied, "You'd probably ask for horseradish as a seasoning, you prick. If I didn't love you so much, I'd come over there and kick you hard. Send me a copy, and we can see how it goes. I love you." With that, she hung up the phone. Her lawyer agreed with almost everything I proposed but added a clause for spousal maintenance of $10,000 a year for the non-requesting spouse. I accepted that, and she got the ring back. We got married, and I switched jobs to become the head repairer and troubleshooter in the company until the opportunity to buy it arose, which was about 6 years into our marriage. I worked hard, and while I wasn't the most romantic or culturally inclined person, I would occasionally buy her flowers just because, and I took her to concerts and plays. We also enjoyed dancing and went bar hopping once or twice a year. I eventually realized I liked alcohol too much, so I quit drinking. However, I continued to do all the other activities and never stopped Kathy from enjoying a drink at home. During our vacations and long weekends, we traveled all over the country. Life seemed good, and Kathy didn't seem to complain, so I thought everything was well. We both enjoyed exploring new things together and trying out different activities to keep our relationship exciting. I was focused on my work and supporting Kathy in her pursuits. We both loved our trips and experiences together, and I even got a minivan and had it modified for our adventures. Somehow, we never ended up having children, and we never discussed the topic. As in all relationships, the frequency of intimacy slowed down over time, shifting from almost every night to 2 or 3 times a week. I was content and had no complaints until about 6 months before I overheard the phone call. That was when Kathy seemed to lose interest in intimacy altogether. It took me a couple of months to realize that our moments together were becoming infrequent, and sometimes they felt like mercy sex, where Kathy seemed disengaged. I had recently set up an answering machine gadget connected to a spare computer for testing. About 6 weeks after installation, I discovered a bug that caused the device to start recording as soon as the phone was answered after a certain number of calls. This feature used up hard drive space, so once a week, I would print a list of phone numbers and call lengths before deleting the recordings to free up space. After about a month of this routine, I noticed a significant number of calls lasting 30 to 45 minutes from 2 different numbers. One was from Kathy's sister, while the other was unknown. The calls consistently occurred after Kathy got home, just before I arrived about 90 minutes later. There were additional calls from the same unknown number, but if the phone wasn't answered, they would hang up before leaving a message. I started saving those recordings to a CD to listen to later. After a particularly challenging week, I decided to take a 5-day weekend and began listening to the recorded calls. Most of the conversations with Kathy's sister were filled with gossip and mundane topics. However, as I continued, I noticed that the discussions gradually shifted toward their respective sex lives around the time my intimacy with Kathy had declined. During one call with her sister, Kathy admitted to fantasizing about having a lover. This revelation was followed by more frequent calls. Her sister commented on how lucky Kathy was to have a man like me who was attracted to her. Kathy responded by saying, "I don't know. Ben has become so boring. We don't do any sexually exciting things anymore. I think now that Chad is starting to sniff around at work, I may see if teasing him will spice my life up." I was furious, but at that point, it still felt like fantasy. I listened to a few more calls, and about 4 weeks later, I noticed an increase in the unknown number calls. I initially thought one of them was innocent. It was Chad, simply confirming a luncheon with the trust officers and discussing other work-related topics. However, the following week, Chad's call took a shocking turn. After starting with typical work discussions, he casually mentioned, "The trust officer luncheon was a bust, but you were sure a lot of fun afterward. I didn't know you had a birthmark there." Now I was extremely angry because Kathy has a birthmark on the inside of her left breast that can only be seen when she's bare. Even the most revealing bikini covers it. The next time we had what I'd come to call mercy sex, I was caught off guard when Kathy insisted on having the lights off. That struck me as unusual. The only times we had ever made love in the dark were when we were in the car or outdoors. When I asked her what was wrong, she replied, "Nothing is wrong. I just want the lights out and I'm not in the mood for something heavy." At that point, I felt my frustration boil over, and I lost my mind. I snapped, "Jez Kathy, now you're not only cutting down on frequency, you're cutting down on positions. No thanks, I'll sleep in my office. That way, you can have the dark." I got some bedding and pillows and made a bed on the daybed in the office. The next morning, Kathy came out with red, swollen eyes, clearly having cried. She apologized, but I wasn't ready to let her off that easily. If you value our marriage, you need to understand something. Forsaking all others is not just a simple, flowery wedding thing. They are called vows because they are just that. If you ever cheat on me in word or deed, our marriage is over. Kathy's face went pale, and she ran crying from the room, slamming the master bathroom door behind her. I left for work, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I stayed in the home office for several more weeks, continuing to listen to more and more suggestive phone calls. About 15 days later, I heard Chad say, "You taste so good, and you really get my motors really running. I hope you're still limiting sex with that a-hole husband. You belong to me. If he insists, give him a BJ." The following night, as I returned home from work, I stumbled upon Kathy in the bathroom, completely naked. My heart sank when I noticed she had shaved bare, something she had adamantly told me she would never do. My eyes were drawn to a prominent hickey on her breast and several others scattered across her thighs. She let out a scream, demanding that I leave. I shot back, my anger rising. "Get dressed and meet me at the kitchen table in 15 minutes, or I'm calling a lawyer in the morning, and it won't be to update my will." I stormed to the office, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal, and pulled out the prenup, placing it on the kitchen table like a warning sign. About 25 minutes later, Kathy finally came down, looking flustered. She opened her mouth to speak, trying to explain. "I can explain." "Not unless you're going to tell the truth," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Why does this prenup mean so little to you? Did you really shave for Chad when you refused to do it for me all those years? Did he complain more than I ever did about hair?" Her eyes darted away from mine, and I could see the guilt washing over her. "Ben, I didn't mean. Did Chad need to mark his territory?" I continued, my voice rising. "I've never put a hickey on you because I respected your body. But clearly, he had no problem claiming you in ways I never would. And how about the things you told your sister? How I was so boring? Well, guess what? I won't be boring anymore. Chad can have you. I'm moving out this weekend." Kathy's expression turned to panic. "What are you saying? You can't just leave me like this." "Oh, but I can," I replied coldly. "You'll get everything you're entitled to." "Oh wait, by the terms of the prenup, that means nothing. You'll need to move out. I'll be sleeping in the office until the weekend, and if your things aren't out of this house by then, I'll make a bonfire out of them." Her face went pale, and she seemed at a loss for words. "You can't be serious. We've built a life together. You're throwing it all away? Built on lies." I shouted, my frustration boiling over. "You made your choices, Kathy. You chose to betray me, and now you need to face the consequences. You've broken my trust, and I can't keep living like this." Kathy took a hesitant step toward me, desperation in her eyes. "Ben, please, just give me a chance to explain. I can change." "Change?" I scoffed, crossing my arms. "You expect me to believe that after what I just saw? You've lost that right. I'll do anything, she pleaded, tears forming in her eyes. Just don't leave me. I shook my head, the hurt in my chest becoming heavier. It's too late for that. You've made your choice, and I refuse to let you play the victim now. I'm done. Kathy fainted, and I stepped around her to grab some juice and a salad from the fridge. I settled at the table, waiting for her to come to. When she finally regained consciousness, she stared at me, opened her mouth to say something, but only a squeak escaped. In a panic, she bolted from the room and locked herself in the master bedroom. After finishing my meal and tidying up, I knocked on the bedroom door. When there was no response, I remembered a time when a neighbor's kid had locked himself in the bathroom, and I pulled out a bent paperclip I had stashed above the door. I quickly unlocked the door and started to go through her side of the dresser. "What are you doing in there?" Kathy shouted from inside after she realized I had opened the door. I chuckled and replied, "It's my house now, and you're either going to the guest room or you're leaving. Your choice. And if you decide to go, you'll need to take a cab because I'm canceling the lease on your car." "Why are you being such a jerk?" she shot back, clearly upset. I looked her in the eye, gesturing to the marks on her body. "Just take a good look in the mirror. Remember our discussion about trust and the argument over the prenup? I heard your little fling bragging about how it felt to put his meat where the sun doesn't shine. You never let me do that." I paused, waiting to see if she had any words to defend herself. After Kathy closed her mouth, she sighed deeply and slowly emerged from the bedroom, making her way to the guest room. I heard the door click shut behind her. The next morning, Kathy left for work, and I called my office to inform them that I was dealing with some important personal issues and wouldn't be in for the rest of the week. After that, I contacted a private investigator our company used for periodic employee checks and internal investigations. They had a division that specialized in this sort of work, and they asked how serious I was about my request. I explained that what I truly wanted was for my wife to not be cheating, but since she was, I wanted them to do everything legal to prove it. I mentioned I had hours of recorded phone conversations between the two of them, but since he didn't know he was being recorded, I wasn't sure how that would play out in court. Next, I reached out to my lawyer. He assured me he would begin the paperwork and serve her as soon as I gave the go-ahead. I asked if he thought the bank might have a non-fraternization policy. He believed they would. Then I dropped the bomb. The man Kathy was cheating with also controlled her trust fund. My lawyer's excitement was palpable. He practically jumped for joy at that revelation, viewing it as a major breach of fiduciary responsibility. I even recalled meeting his wife at one of the few bank-sponsored events we attended, which seemed to add fuel to my lawyer's enthusiasm. "You've made me a richer man today," he chuckled before we ended our call. After that, I contacted the security company responsible for the alarm system and the entry security for all the doors and windows in the house. They informed me that if I provided a new security code, they could change all the locks immediately. I gave them the new code, and they took care of it without delay. Now, all that was left was to inform Kathy that she could no longer enter the house without ringing the doorbell first. When I called her, her reaction was explosive. She went wild, shouting at me through the phone, "You can't do this to me." "Cry me a river," I replied coolly, then hung up the phone, feeling a sense of satisfaction as I took the first steps toward regaining control of my life. Next, I called the bank to inform them that I wanted to close all of the accounts and transfer them to another institution. The representative asked me to hold for a moment, stating that the amounts were significant and she needed to get approval. After a brief pause, an officious man took over the call, demanding to know why I wanted to close the accounts. I replied sharply, "That's none of your business. I just decided it was time to move my accounts to a more reputable bank." There was a moment of silence on the line before he finally relented, confirming that the accounts would be closed and that I could sign the paperwork and pick up the check later that afternoon. I thanked him and set an appointment for 1:30 p.m. I then called my broker and instructed him to remove Kathy from all of my accounts and requested that I be removed from all of hers as well. I needed to sever any financial ties we had left. Feeling the weight of the situation, I called my lawyer again. "Is there a way to sue any and all parties involved at the bank? I want to destroy this Chad person," I said with barely contained anger. He assured me it was in the works. I mentioned the recordings, and although he agreed we couldn't use them in court, he pointed out that if we were countersued, they could serve as bargaining material. Next, I reached out to the leasing company to inquire about the buyout for Kathy's car. When I discovered how little it would cost, I decided to purchase it. I might be furious, but I thought a little compassion could help soothe some of her anger. Kathy moved in with her sister that weekend. When her sister started criticizing my actions, I lost my patience. I tugged at Kathy's shirt and pointed to the mark on her chest. "Look, there's more on the inside of her legs. And just so you know, I haven't had sex with her in almost a month. The shock on her sister's face was instant, and it effectively silenced any further accusations. The private investigator returned with all the information I needed, confirming my worst suspicions. The report revealed that Kathy and her lover were charging their lunch trysts to the bank as business meetings. I promptly paid the bill for the services rendered and sent a copy of the reports to my lawyer for evidence. I instructed my lawyer to serve all interested parties the next business day at around 2 p.m. I made it a point to schedule an appointment with my trust officer for that same time. His office was conveniently located next to Kathy's, as well as Chad's. I found myself in the waiting area of my trust officer's office, growing impatient as he was running behind. Just then, I noticed two young people enter, accompanied by a sheriff's deputy. Each of them clutched large manila envelopes. They first entered the supervising trust officer's office, which didn't seem to cause much of a stir. However, when they moved to Chad's office, I heard him yell, "He can't do that," before he stormed out, heading straight for Kathy. When Chad spotted me sitting there, he let out a startled screech and charged at me, landing a punch that caught me completely off guard. The impact was powerful enough to knock me out for a few seconds. When I came to, I saw Chad in handcuffs, and the deputy was looking at me with concern, assessing whether I was okay. He asked, "What did you do to make that guy so mad?" I gestured toward Kathy's office and told him, "You might want to ask the lady in the next office." I then instructed him to charge Chad with whatever seemed appropriate, and I'd be more than willing to sign the complaint. After the deputy left, I called my lawyer to give him an update. He couldn't help but giggle like a schoolgirl as I recounted the events. "Thanks for the yacht," he said. "Now it won't matter if the bank has a policy or not. An officer of the bank attacked a customer on bank property during business hours. How do you feel about owning a branch, or 10, of that bank?" I chuckled half-heartedly, responding, "The fireworks are over, but now the waterworks will start. They're going into Kathy's office as we speak. Just send me the bill when all is said and done." My lawyer returned with a chuckle, saying, "By the time we're done, I'll make sure one of the provisions is that the bank pays my bill. I'll let you go for now, but keep me updated." With that, he hung up. Kathy didn't scream or yell, nor did I hear any crying, which led me to believe she might have been expecting this fallout. When I got home, I found several messages on the new answering machine, along with numerous voicemails from Kathy on my cell. The calls on the machine were from bank employees wanting to discuss the lawsuits, so I deleted the voicemails without listening. I then called Kathy's sister, asking her to relay that I wouldn't speak with Kathy unless it was in my lawyer's office. I received an intriguing call from my private investigator, who informed me that the state's attorney general's office had begun an investigation into Chad's potential looting of several trust funds, including Kathy's. It turned out that he had been seducing her to keep her oblivious to his actions. Chad was subsequently arrested on charges of grand theft, embezzlement, and breach of trust. Tragically, Kathy's trust was nearly depleted by his actions. Upon discovering this, she decided to sue the bank. With the aid of our lawyers, we secured high seven-figure settlements from the bank, successfully restoring Kathy's trust in the process. Despite her attempts at reconciliation, I simply handed her a jar of mustard. The day of the divorce finalization felt surreal. Sitting across from Kathy in that sterile conference room, I could see the weight of what was about to happen settling heavily on her shoulders. The judge went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere, consumed by everything that had transpired. When the ruling came down, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The marriage I once cherished had turned into a battleground, and now it was finally over. The terms were laid out: the settlements, the custody arrangements, the division of assets. I glanced at Kathy, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of empathy. But then I remembered the betrayal, the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. It wasn't long after the divorce was finalized that the scandal broke. I had been discreet in my approach, but I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. I leaked the videos of her and chat online, knowing it would cause chaos. It was a moment of weakness, one I regretted, but it felt justified at the time. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted her to feel the weight of her actions. The fallout was immediate. Friends and colleagues turned their backs on her, and the whispers followed her everywhere. It was as if the entire town had turned against her. I watched as her confidence crumbled, how she became a shadow of the person she once was. Eventually, it became clear that she couldn't stay in town any longer. The humiliation was too much to bear. When she packed her things and left, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. I had won the battle, but at what cost? As she drove away, I wondered if I had crossed a line that I couldn't uncross. I had told myself I was merely reclaiming my power, but seeing her so defeated made me question my motives. The silence that filled the house after she left was deafening. I was free, but it felt emptier than I had imagined. I had hoped that letting her go would give me closure, but instead, I found myself grappling with the reality of what we had lost. The divorce was finalized, and she was gone, but the echoes of our past lingered on. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.